are finished!
To say that Visions of Mana has high expectations to live up to would be an understatement. For nearly 20 years, only spin-offs and 3D remakes have been tiding fans of the series over. But thankfully, the wait for a new entry was worth it. Although there are a few glaring issues, Visions of Mana successfully brings the mana formula into the modern age, with excellent combat and class systems, as well as a new cast of likable characters. It's not only a great mana game, but one of the most enjoyable RPGs in years. The opening acts of Visions of Mana storytelling can be summed up with one word: simple. But that's a compliment. While it's great for games to tackle complex subjects or have dense lore to comb through, not everything needs to be complicated just for the sake of it. Instead of bogging its plot down with needless exposition, Visions of Mana keeps things straightforward to start, and it's better for it. You play as Val, a skilled swordsman who must escort a group of people chosen to sacrifice their souls to sustain the Tree of Mana. This includes Hina, Val's childhood best friend and hinted sweetheart, and the two instantly make for an endearing duo. You'd normally expect a character in Val's role as a guardian to be someone who takes things too seriously, but instead he's cheerful, charming, and brimming with optimism. And rather than dwell on being compelled to sacrifice herself, Hina is honored to be selected and excited to make her pilgrimage with Val by her side.
I accept.
The party members they gain along the way have their own distinctive personalities that add some needed variety. Karina, for example, is plucky yet irritable, and for some absolutely baffling reason, speaks with a heavy Texan accent.
Life's full of surprises.
Morley, meanwhile, is easily the most serious of the group, but it's his blunt attitude that leads to some of the funniest moments.
I've been demoted to platform.
Each character has a proper arc that gives them a chance to grow, and their stories are woven into the central plot organically.
I won't let anyone down.
Visions of Mana's main story is intriguing from the very beginning, but while the first half keeps a brisk pace, it slows to an absolute crawl later on. Avoiding spoilers, a large chunk of the final 15 to 20 hours of this roughly 30 to 40 hour campaign feels like unnecessary padding. There ends up being a lot of retreading that feels like an unwelcome detour where the story had been heading.
I failed as a soul guard.
This turning point is also when the plot's simplicity is thrown out the window and the exposition dumps start to pile up on top of each other. These issues hurt much of the early momentum, but in spite of that, the overall story is still enjoyable and the ending itself is emotionally satisfying. The real star of Visions of Mana, one that shines even when the story falters, is its combat. Fights are fast and frantic, with a number of systems to keep track of. You have your standard and special attacks, as well as moves and spells like fireballs or shurikens, which can be used to mix things up and exploit enemy vulnerabilities.
You're mine!
Attacking, taking damage, and using moves slowly fills up the class strike gauge, that then lets you perform a devastating attack that you'll want to unleash at the right moments. Even more depth is added to the combat with ability seeds, which are obtained through quests, chests, and battles. Some seeds grant you passive bonuses, like upping your stats, while others provide entirely new moves. Later on, you'll even be able to transfer the core stones of defeated enemies and bosses into more powerful seeds. A particular highlight summons a late-game boss to unleash some serious damage. During all this, you'll also incorporate equipable items called elemental vessels, each of which has its own special ability. For example, the Luna Globe will briefly create a small bubble on the battlefield that slows down enemies while speeding up the attacks and spellcasting times of the party. However, when a character equips any given elemental vessel, they'll automatically be swapped to its associated class. This leads to the best mechanic in Visions of Mana, the class system. While that Luna Globe ability itself will never change, the role, moves, and abilities of the character equipped with it will. Every character has a class entirely unique to them for every element available, and the first time you equip one will treat you to a wonderfully cheesy costume transformation cutscene straight out of a Super Sentai show. The Luna Globe will transform Val into an Aegis, changing him from his default melee role into a tank. Instead of using his sword as normal, he'll wield a lance and shield, with a move that aggroes enemies and an ability that allows him to survive what would otherwise be a fatal blow once per battle. Meanwhile, Karina will instead transform into a Moon Charterer and take on a buff support role through Fan Dancing. You'll unlock even more moves and abilities for each vessel thanks to the Elemental plot, which acts as an upgrade system. The key difference between those two types of actions is that any moves you learn are permanent and can be equipped regardless of a character's class, whereas abilities are tied to the class itself. So Val won't get that protection from a fatal blow unless he's an Aegis, but he'll always have the option to add the aggro move from his repertoire. It provides an exciting reason not to invest solely in one class.
You're mine!
All of these systems tie together in a way that encourages strategy over button mashing. You're likely to end up with preferred classes for certain characters, but some situations might require you to invest upgrade points into a vessel you didn't plan to use on that character just to unlock certain moves. And other times, it's easier to reclass them entirely, if only for specific fights. That smartly encourages you to branch out and try classes you otherwise might not. For instance, Morley's class associated with the Water Elemental vessel will transform him into a hybrid of a Stage Magician and Gambit from X-Men who can stun enemies. But to defeat one particularly challenging boss, you might need to change his class to one with a focus on critical hits that can maximize damage output. This could also mean swapping some ability seeds that boost critical damage hit rate for complete synergy between all of these systems.
May you peacefully.
You'll want to make sure you understand how to make the most of each class and take advantage of all your options, because bosses and Visions of Mana can be tough even on the normal difficulty setting. There are some really inventive boss designs, both visually and mechanically. One might heavily focus on area of effect attacks, while another summons minions to distract you from its laser beam attack. Every boss kept me on the edge of my seat, and slaying them always felt rewarding. Exploration also makes up a huge bulk of Visions of Mana. From lush jungles to snowy tundras to seaside villages, every location feels unique and lets the gorgeous art style shine. It's vibrant and looks like something out of a storybook, which fits the fantastical tone. That said, while the art style itself is great, Visions of Mana has its fair share of visual bugs and some rare but substantial frame rate drops even in performance mode on PS5. There are also a lot of moments where the lip syncing doesn't match up, and at one point a character was speaking without their mouth moving at all.
Brave words, Soul God.
Even still, hidden chests and collectibles will have you exploring every inch of the map, and might even pull you towards optional areas you would otherwise have breezed right by. Even if you only do a handful of the optional activities, Visions of Mana has a lengthy campaign, and there's a ton of side quests, collectibles, and more still left to tackle once the credits roll. And because it's so much fun to play, it's hard to resist the urge to immediately dive right back in to complete everything Visions of Mana has to offer.
This should do it!
Visions of Mana finally brings the long-dormant classic RPG series into the modern age, looking great and playing even better, thanks to the multi-layered class and skill system that interact in clever ways. There are definitely some pacing issues and a few questionable design choices later on, and the occasional frame rate drop or awkward lip syncing can distract. But the flashy and exciting combat, deeply rewarding class system, and cast of likable characters make Visions of Mana a winning combat for the classic series all the same. And a great game, even if you haven't spent decades waiting for it. For more RPGs, check out our reviews of The Legend of Heroes Trails Through Daybreak or Fallout London. And for everything else, stick with IGN.